Right, yes. So, as Donnie Utah said, we'll be speaking about Amoghasiddhi. So, first, before that, I just wanted to say something about engaging with these Buddha figures. You might have just, turned up on this retreat yesterday, and suddenly we've got a green man on the shrine. And what do we make of that? What do we make of the fact that there's this green figure on the shrine holding his hand up in the air? And I guess one way of thinking about it, a phrasing that I used in the puja workshop a lot in the first half of the retreat, was saying that, we could think of a sort of the arising of wisdom in Buddhist practice as being like a meeting of minds. Yeah, so the arising of wisdom, all of our practice, our actions in relation to other people, acting generously, trying to put others more and more forefront in our life, practicing meditation, trying to soften the way that we kind of separate ourselves off from the world. All of that can amount to a sort of expansion of consciousness. Yeah? And at that point, when that happens, in moments where that is the case, it's like what's happened is that there's suddenly more consciousness. Yeah? We're used to relating to consciousness as something that's human. That's how we know it. We know it in ourselves. We know it in what we can see behind someone else's eyes when we're speaking to them. And in order to relate, how do we relate to more consciousness, but in a human form? So we need to find a way to rather than wisdom being a series of abstract thoughts that we're trying to comprehend, it's more like someone we're trying to meet, someone we just haven't quite met yet, someone who's quite different to anyone we've ever met before. And so tonight we're going to meet Amoghasiddhi, and Donnie Todd said about some of these other figures, but Amoghasiddhi is, in a way, Amoghasiddhi is Amoghasiddhi. There's nothing that I could say that's going to completely define him. But Amoghasiddhi is, we could think of as the Buddha of fearless, compassionate action. Yeah? Fearless, compassionate action. In a way, I thought you could think of Amoghasiddhi as the enlightened response to suffering. Yeah? So there's suffering in the world, and our practice isn't just escaping from that and sorting our own life out. There's a response to that. In a way, Buddhism is a response to that. The Buddha's teaching is a response to that. The Buddha said something like this. This is, of course, a translation. He said, "Only one thing do I teach, suffering and the end of suffering." So the Buddha teaches suffering. That doesn't sound much fun. What I think that's saying is so Buddhism has been accused of being pessimistic for that reason. It's interest in suffering, in our experience, in other people's experience. In a way, I think it's not pessimistic, but realistic. It's saying this is an aspect of life. And just by recognizing it, we recognize more of life. It's the side of life we want to ignore. We want to ignore any discomfort, any suffering on our own experience, and we're quite happy to ignore it when we see it out in the world as well. It's so much easier not to look a homeless person in the eye, isn't it? It's just so much easier, not because, I don't know, what's the worst that's going to happen, but it's just uncomfortable, isn't it, to think, to have to sort of engage with something that looks painful, difficult. And yet by recognizing it, we open up our awareness to more of life. Yeah? And it's also the starting point of practice, because we really, really don't want to suffer. That it's massively motivating for us to not be suffering. And probably all of us have there's some suffering that's got us here. It might be a really extreme form of suffering that's kind of made us realize, I really need to do something different with my life. I really can't go back to whatever place that was. Or it might just be a sense of dissatisfaction, even like even an irritation with the usual Christmas or New Year is a sense of like, well, it's just not quite good enough. It's just not what I want to do. I want something better. So even it's like, we can even think of it in terms of, it's like irritation with life being just not good enough, just not enough. And so we want to move towards something more, something better. So I was thinking there's different types of suffering, and there are invisible forms of suffering, and there are visible forms of suffering. And I think we tend to be quite literal minded, and we particularly focus on the more visible ones. So the news gives us plenty of input for that. And of course, there's very, very extreme, very visible forms of suffering in the world. And you just flick on the news, open a newspaper, and you'll see those. I think the problem with that, because they're so in your face, and the problem with being sort of addicted to the news cycle, is it's almost like we get hooked onto the really visible forms. And we miss everything else. We miss that which is invisible. So I was saying yesterday evening that I was mentioning my friend who's been having a very difficult time, which is very much in my mind at the moment, and him saying to me that he was shocked, and his eyes had been opened to just how painful life could be, just how difficult experience could be. And it's been interesting talking to him about it, because what I've been trying to help him to see is that if that's true in one direction, it's true entirely in the other direction as well. And it's hard to recognise that where you are, because that's the world you're in. I think I used the phrase a minute ago, and you might use the phrase, you've been to a dark place, say. And in a way, that's a good word for it. It's a place. It's not just an experience that's happening in your head. It's our minds create the worlds that we inhabit. So if we have a really good metabhavana, suddenly we come into the dinner hall and everyone's lovely. Yeah, everyone's just really nice. Everyone would be perfectly happy if we sat next to them. And the food's delicious. And if we're in a darker place, then the world can be a very dark place. And what the sort of cruel trick of it, the cruel illusion of it, is that that just is the world, and it's not. So we can notice that even within the retreat. One moment we might be we have a good meditation, we're having the best time, and then maybe later on in the day we have a meditation that's less satisfying, and suddenly it's all going wrong. So just seeing if you can just notice that you've been in two different worlds in one day. And but it's not just this sort of. It's not just when things are at their worst. A lot of the sort of invisible suffering that I'm talking about is we've got a sort of epidemic of a mental health crisis, particularly following on from the pandemic. I mean, it's sort of like, what did we expect, locking everyone away from each other for so long? So there's a sort of extreme form. But even when our lives are going sort of broadly well, from the perspective of a Buddha, from the perspective of Amoghasiddhi, that's still suffering. The experience of enlightenment is sometimes described as the great bliss. Yeah? So at the worst, you've got the dark place at one end, which is sort of like a hell, really, at worst. A hell on earth that is existed within. And on another, you've got a heaven. Then we could exist on earth in a heaven. We can exist on earth experiencing the great bliss, which is beyond all that we could imagine. So that's the sort of feeling equivalent of wisdom. So in a way, the problem is that we're trapped in this band, this narrow bandwidth of experience. The positive side of actually dipping below that is that you realize just how flexible the mind is, and just how much we need to keep working on our minds in order to move in a positive direction. The problem is that we sort of get stuck there. And in a way, we can sort of build our lives. So it's so easy to sort of build a life that we just sort of think we're supposed to be doing, because and get trapped in the rat race of, I figure like I go through school, then I should maybe go to university or get some other training. I do that, I get a job, then I should probably get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever. And then we should probably buy a house and get a mortgage and so on. And then there's a kind of, in a way, there's just this sort of expectation that might be just largely unquestioned. I think I thought I was going, not that any of those things are a bad thing in themselves, but it's very easy just to sort of go along with that, and later at some point just be like, wait a minute, this isn't the life that I wanted to lead. And I think that there's a sort of, and just this sense that, I think on some level we all know that there actually must be something more than this. Because being alive is clearly magic. There's clearly a magic in it. But why am I not experiencing that? Why am I not experiencing that right now? Why is it just another day? The sun rises in this sort of miraculous way over the horizon, and yet we just sort of feel like we just need to get on our clothes and go to work, and it's just another day. So I kind of want to, I guess the problem with the more visible types of suffering is that we forget that suffering is incredibly widespread. And from the perspective of a Buddha, all of us are suffering in a big way, in a big way. And that suffering manifests by how closed and tight our consciousness is, in a way that makes our lives really important, basically. Like our problems, our relationships, etc., become really, really sort of loaded and important, because they're wrapped so tightly around what we want and what we don't want. So the Buddha doesn't just teach suffering, he teaches an end to suffering. So we could think about that in terms of an end to suffering for ourselves, and an end of suffering for the world as well. So first of all, especially if it's suffering that's got us on the path, got us wanting to practice, wanting to experience a bit more of this bliss, and a bit less of the sort of tightness, we need to work directly on our minds. And for that, we need to, in some sense, take a step back from our life as we're normally leading it. So coming on retreat is a way of doing that, isn't it? We need to kind of put down all the things that we're normally preoccupied with and distracted by and feel intuitively are just somehow really important. Put them down for a while and realize that actually, okay, there's something else. Actually, I'm just being alive for a while. So I was over the autumn. I did a long solitary retreat. So I was in a hut in a mountain valley in a pine forest in southern Spain for 12 weeks. It was just me and a family of wild boar and some eagles that would when I was having dinner outside would kind of fly and land in this cliff face that faced my hut. So it's me and those guys. In a way, it was like that. For me, that was definitely the most sort of extreme form I've done of this withdrawing from the world, to turn off my phone for 3 months. I got back and turned out the Queen had died, and that was really old news. It was like I was all shocked. I had to do this whole thing, like, oh my God, the Queen's dead, and everyone's like, yeah. But what it meant was that slowly, through relaxing and through engaging with my experience, it felt like the the sort of the boundary, the sort of, at moments at least, the kind of expected boundary around myself that made me so separate from everything else just felt a bit thinner. And in those moments, particularly in moments where I realized just how much I was kind of holding it all together, it's like not just that there's a boundary, it's like I'm creating the boundary with tension. So I'm sort of holding myself together and being like, I'm Sthiramanas, I'm this kind of person, I'm going to go home and this is going to happen, it's going to be okay. I don't want that bee to bite me because that'll be painful. And it's like all, I'm sort of doing all of that. And there's in recognizing that and in sort of feeling quite deeply into that actual experience of creating that constricted self, you sort of see, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that at all. And in those moments, just having a sense of complete relief and just the sense that, actually, there's nothing to worry about. There's really, really nothing to worry about at all. But then I had to come back, and I was pleased to come back. I wanted to come back and engage with things again. I was pretty ready. And of course, that's not the end in itself. It's not so. Buddhist practice isn't only to escape from the world and get clear, to find this sort of freedom for ourselves. Because sort of what we then see, especially if we go into a city or come somewhere like this where we're surrounded by people, is we see that there's suffering everywhere. And especially if we've got a bit of that perspective in our own experience, that it doesn't need to be like that, the natural response is to want to help. So Buddhist practice is also aiming to transform the world. It's ambitious in that respect. It's very, very, very ambitious in that respect. It wants to end. The aim of Buddhist practice is to end suffering for all beings. Not just the visible sufferings, although not excluding them. It's really, we do need to, like collectively, we do want to help people who are homeless. We do want to try and end wars. We do want to do what we can about famines and droughts and all the kind of tangible, obvious sufferings. But we also mustn't be so distracted by that we forget that there's something much more pervasive that all of us are partaking in. And it's only a response to that deeper issue that can really end suffering. So I sort of, in my before I came to Buddhist practice, and around the time I was coming to Buddhist practice, I was feeling a bit more political. And I felt like, I could see that there were major issues in the world, and I felt anxious about them, and I really wanted them not to be the case. I was scared at the idea that the world was heating up. I was scared at the idea that our economy was all going to collapse, and all, reasonable concerns. But my response was I wanted to see a sort of big systemic change. I wanted to sort of see things from that angle. And again, probably there are changes that need to happen from that side. The problem was I was sort of het up and a bit angry, and forgetting that and thinking about the world that I wanted to help and change being something over there, something in the hands of politicians, something in something that's sort of, something very abstract, really. And I went on a couple of marches, and marches are good; they make a point. But I didn't feel very challenged by it. I stood in a replica Viking longboat on the steps of the Tate Britain, and then we went to the pub. And it was nice. It was nice. I did, there's nothing wrong with it. But I didn't feel very challenged by it. I didn't feel like I was really sort of stepping into the breach and doing something. So I think that, the mistake is to think that the world is something out there. The world is right here. The world is right all around us. There are 120-odd other people here. And if we're not thinking of suffering as something that's abstract and out there, and can relate to the fact that all of us are partaking in it somehow, then we can engage with individuals, the individuals that are there in front of us in our life, and make a very tangible difference. And that might be subtle how we do that. It's tempting to, again, speaking to friends who are having a difficult time, etc., it's tempting to give advice and be like, oh, well, why don't you do this? And in a way, we want to kind of fix something. We want to say, oh, you could do that or that thing, and that will make it better. And in a way, that kind of we want to sort of wrap it up and then be done with it. Feel like we've solved it, and that's straightforward. But in a way, all we can really do is to be very present with someone. Someone's going through a difficult time, even if someone's just bored, to just really engage with them in a full way, and to see them, to meet them as they are in that moment, I think is a sort of potentially sort of it's a potential response to suffering. In a way, you could say that friendship is the enlightened response to suffering. Friendship in a full sense. Friendship that isn't just getting along, rubbing along together, doing things that are enjoyable, etc., although that's nice. That's part of it. But a friendship that is able to really take someone in, like we were doing in the communication exercise, that you might have got a sense of just really being with someone, and the sense that you could see somehow so much more of them. And particularly if we're working on ourselves and becoming much more aware of ourselves and the nature of being a human being, and the fact that actually, from the fullest perspective, we don't need to be suffering like this. If we can look at somebody else with that perspective, then we can see the same potential in them. And the mere presence of that awareness, the mere fact of being able to meet someone from that position can have a very, very transforming effect, much more than we'd realised. The problem with the world out there issues is that most of the time we can't actually do anything about them. It's just not unless we, are a high-ranking politician or something, and even them, I don't know how much they can do. We can just sit here feeling powerless, but we actually have a potentially huge power just through really, really engaging with people. And in order to do that, we need to first of all be working on our own minds, because it's no good engaging with someone if we're angry at them, or a bit sort of worried about what they think of us, or just sort of full of ideas as to what they should be doing. Yeah. So we're knocking to not only to transform ourselves, but to transform the world. And there's a danger to doing them with an imbalance. So if we're just trying to transform ourselves, then we sort of neglect everyone else. We just sort of leave them to it. And we might need to do that for periods. Like we go away on retreat like this to really engage with ourselves, so that we can go back. So that we can go back and engage with our lives and the other people in our lives, even the people here actually while we're here, with something else, with more of a perspective, with more weight to be able to meet them with. And if we're not thinking of others in this, then, well, all of our actions are going to just keep revolving around me. I'm just going to keep doing things that suit me, even to suit my own spiritual development. That would be really good for my spiritual development. I should really take a night off and maybe I won't do the washing up. Maybe I will just have a nap because I'm tired and it'll be good for my mental states, etc. What that's doing is actually just making ourselves more and more the centre of our world, and just tightening that same knot that's going to cause us suffering. But if we're just focused on transforming the world and not focused on transforming ourselves, as I mentioned, well, we're not going to have a perspective with which to meet people. What we're going to have is a load of flurry and a load of sort of strong and potentially negative emotions that are just sort of bashing around into the world. And there's plenty of negative emotions bashing around into the world without us adding to them. So what we get is this clash of opposites. So here, in Amoghasiddhi's hand, we see he holds a double vajra. And you'll see some of them on the shrine, this thing called a double vajra. So Amoghasiddhi in the first half of the retreat was talking about the Vajra, which Akshobhya holds a single Vajra. I'm not competing, Amoghasiddhi, but you know. So the Vajra is a symbol of ultimate reality. Yeah? It's said to be the hardest, is hard as diamond, the hardest thing in the universe, and as powerful as a thunderbolt. So it's a symbol for the entrance of reality into the world, the entrance of the fullness of wisdom into the world. And this, Amoghasiddhi holds two, and they're like this. I can't really tell you much more what that means, but it's two of them. David Mitra was saying to me the other day, it's like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. Yeah? And so he holds that in his hand. And there's something about it's in this shape, it's in a cross, so it's going in all directions. And it's on two separate axes. And for me, that symbolizes this tension between going to withdrawing from the world, really engaging with our experience deeply, with a stillness and a sensitivity that means that we can really open ourselves up to this bigger perspective, whilst also really engaging with what other people need, energetically trying to give time to our friends, to really listen to them, to make more friends, to make friends with people who need friends, to look for what needs doing in a situation and be the first person to be there and help do it. And of course, that's helping. That's helping by engaging with the world in that way, by engaging with others in that way. That's helping what we're doing in transforming ourselves, because it's just weakening our preoccupation with me. So the two things actually work together, but they can appear to be pulling in completely opposite directions. So I've particularly experienced that being on the team for this retreat. This one, actually, yeah. But even I've been on the team for this for a number of years, including when I was quite new to practicing Buddhism. And I remember on that first retreat that I was on, Yanavacha was leading the team then, as he is now. And he was saying that, in a way, this tension between engagement and withdrawal, really withdrawing into our own experience, maybe that's not even the right word, but really trying to transform ourselves, whilst also really trying to help others and help the retreat. That's the theme for our retreat as the team. I think the theme was something like the Five Buddha Mandala, and he was like, that's the theme of the retreat, but really for us, the theme of the retreat is this sense of transforming ourselves and helping others at the same time, this great tension. And it was challenging, and because, I'd have this sense that, we'd go to a group, and then I'd be washing up after dinner, and then it was like one thing after another, and I was like washing up dishes, chatting to people at dinner, then going to a team meeting, talking to them all, then I'd come to meditate, and then the next thing, and in a way I'd get down onto my meditation cushion and feel like, God, I really need to meditate. Like I'm really going to have to meditate to be able to keep going through this. And it really helped. It really helped my meditation to feel like I had a reason to meditate, that it was for something. So, in a way, the double Vajras is expressing this kind of stretch that's inherent in a fully engaged Buddhist practice, that we're trying to develop the biggest possible perspective for ourselves and then engage with that perspective in the world. And to do that stretches us. It takes us to our limits. It puts us in situations where we might really want to engage with someone, but it's a bit scary. We don't know what the outcome will be. We don't know what they'll think of us. We don't know whether we'll succeed, whether we'll fail. And so it requires a growth in courage for us to feel, as they say, feel the fear and do it anyway. To keep recognizing the things that we're scared of and consciously cultivating an attitude of being like, that scares me, I'm going to go do that. Not recklessly, not without. We need to look before we leap as well. So we're not just sort of courting danger for the sake of it, but we need to look, but we also then do need to leap. If we're going to grow in ourselves, if we're going to grow in our consciousness, then we do need to keep leaping. But this gesture of Amoghasiddhi's, so he's holding the Vajra in one hand, the double Vajra, and his right hand is in this gesture, this mudra, and it's the mudra of fearlessness, the Abhaya mudra. So this is what this means. He's saying, do not fear. And that's helpful when we need courage, when we are afraid. It's sort of encouraging. But where that's coming from him is from a very different perspective. From him, it's coming from the biggest possible perspective, which sees that actually, there's nothing to be afraid of. Actually, we're not that separate from the world. We're not separate at all from the world. Although, and we get this when we really look deeply into our experience, we can see that, if I'm eating, at some point the food's going to be me, right? Like it becomes the cells in my body. At what point does that happen? At what point does it stop being spaghetti bolognese and start being me? Likewise with the air that we breathe, likewise with the thoughts that we have. We read things, we hear things, and they become our thoughts. When do they become our thoughts? In transforming ourselves, we're starting to look at things in this way and realize that actually this boundary isn't quite as real as I think. And from the perspective of Amoghasiddhi, it's not real at all. And from that perspective, even death is nothing to be afraid of. He's also the Buddha of action. So if you're truly fearless, then you can act with weight and confidence. But it doesn't need to be a heavy thing either. So action, this compassionate action in Buddhism is sometimes described as lila, which means play. Yeah? So from this perspective, in which there really, really is nothing to worry about, it's just games. Like, if there's nothing to worry about, we could think, oh, well, what? Then I just won't want anything. We don't sort of dissolve into this ethereal mush when that happens. Instead, rather than relying on our own motivation, which is so built around what's going to suit me and what's not going to suit me, instead, it seems that there is some other kind of volition in play that has nothing to do with me. And I don't know what that is. And if I try and describe it, then there's a danger that I'll make it into a thing that we could label and call or turn it into an entity. But that does seem true to me that would be the case. Why is it that everything seems to want to live? Yeah? If you look around you, like things just grow out of the ground towards the sun. We naturally seem to want to find ourselves conditions where our minds will flourish. Snowflakes sort of form into the most intricate and beautiful patterns of their own accord. It's like there's a kind of creative patterning in life that wants to be expressed. And so rather than acting, Amoghasiddhi, rather than acting purely from what he wants, which is like, oh, I really want to save those people and then do that thing, instead it's more like the volition would be an expression of that sort of force in life. And that is apparently experienced as play, as just joyful. So I'm going to finish by just saying, we'll sort of meet. This might be a bit stagey, but we'll see how it goes. We'll sort of meet Amoghasiddhi in our imagination, and I will do that in the context of quoting Dante's Inferno. Yeah? I haven't, as a confession, I haven't actually read Dante's Inferno, but I've read the first canto and it's really good and made me think of Amoghasiddhi. I also read this to my friend the other day. We were having this conversation about, that I was describing about a crisis being the potential turning point of your life. In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself astray in a dark wood where the straight road had been lost sight of. How hard it is to say what it was like in the thick of thickets, in a wood so dense and gnarled, the very thought of it renews my panic. It is bitter, almost as death itself is bitter. But to rehearse the good it also brought me, I will speak about the other things I saw there. So we meet Amoghasiddhi in the woods. It's midnight and there's no moon, but the sky's full of stars. So midnight is the time of Amoghasiddhi. And we emerge into a clearing in the woods, and suddenly, rather than the pitch black that we've had surrounding us, the dark becomes lit up, almost from nowhere. We don't know where from, but suddenly we can turn around us and all we see is the greenery in the quiet, in the still night, lit from seemingly nowhere with this completely tranquil green of leaves and nature. And our fear just seems to dissolve away. And above us in the sky is Amoghasiddhi. He appears to the clash of cymbals like the climax of some symphony. He sits on a giant crystal double vajra, the force inherent in the universe. And he holds his hand in front of him in the gesture of fearlessness. We're left in a state of deep, unshakable calm and confidence just in being in his presence. And we look around us back at the wood from which we came, which was so terrifying, and our perspective on it is completely different. We look back around to the Buddha Amoghasiddhi, and he has disappeared, dissolved into the night sky. Then I sensed a quiet influence settling into those depths in me that had been rocked and pitifully troubled all night long. And as a survivor gasping on the sand turns his head back to study in a daze the dangerous comas, so my mind turned back, although it was reeling forward, back to inspect a pass that had proved fatal heretofore to everyone who entered.